It's your boy Young Love, I give him that treatment. Control leg stand, punchy America. Banyi ban control leg stand, punchy America. Banyi ban walk on the leg, kankaro watan watching. Oga leg gear, pow, leg. Panda with ya, punchy America. Panya ban chingatongo pandon kujura by a check out. Papu panda jiro, what ya be $1. Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Ban leg stand, Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Ban walk on the lake, Kankaro Watana watching, Oga leg gear, pow, leg, Panda with ya, Panchi America, Panya Dwalaman, Chingatongo Pandon, could you ever buy a check out? Paku Panda Jiro, what ya be $1.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are tuning in. Welcome all of you today in Lagos State Media Show Broadcasting. We will be having a brief introductory first to our host and our guest speakers are Professor Taj Elkhazin and Dr. Deng Chol. First of all, I would like to introduce yourself first before we kick in. We start with you, Professor.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I am Taj Elkhazin. I am a retired professor from the Institute of African Studies, Carleton University, Ottawa, Canada, one of our oldest. And I am currently a senior member at the Norman Patterson School for International Affairs, which is one of the schools of Carleton University as well. And I will introduce myself within the capacity of this activity. I have been behind the Nile waters for the last 50 years. My first visit to South Sudan was in May 1972. And since that time, I spent a little bit over 20 years of my life in different places of South Sudan. I surveyed, designed, and supervised the construction of 130 Hafirs in South Sudan, and I advised Dr. John Garang during the negotiations on a number of issues, especially the security arrangements. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much. My pleasure as well. Dr. Deng, Majok, introduce yourself to our audience as well.
Yes, my name is Deng Majok Chol. I am currently a research assistant with Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Abdullah Latif, Water and Food System Lab, based in Massachusetts. I am also a researcher with the United Nations Office for Project Services, which is a consortium between the UN and University of Oxford. I am also a DPhil doctoral candidate in Oxford University, School of Geography and the Environment. Thank you so much. Great to be with you here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deng Majok. First, would like to ask the first question will be insight. Can you, Professor Taj, give us insight about Sud region and South Sudan ecosystem?
Thank you very much for that. we had a little bit of division of labor between Deng and myself. If you have no objection, I would like to give the floor to Deng, and then I will follow up if there are any gaps. Do you mind if we do that?
Yes, it's all right. I don't mind.
Okay, Deng, go ahead.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much. And so my research in University of Oxford focused on the impact of climate-induced extreme weather events on the resiliency of the indigenous population and communities in the South Basin. So your questions about the South Sudan ecosystem, perhaps I would zoom out the frame to contextualize the South regions within South Sudan Nile waters and water resources. The current population in the Nile Basin is about 257 million. Around 50% of the 257 millions are heavily dependent on the Nile waters for economic and domestic existence. And so the rainfall over the basin range from virtually zero to over 2,000 milliliters. So in the case of South Sudan is bisected by the White Nile, descending from the equatorial plateau and spreading over the flat central into the South Welland before exiting into the White Nile in the north. The population density in South Sudan is the highest along the Nile Valley, including the seasonal and perennial wetland of the South. So in the case of South region, we have to look at the fragility and complexity of the South ecosystem. All of that form a phenomenon over a large spatial coverage from Mangala in central Equatoria to Malakal in Upper Nile, with Jonglei State, Lakes State, Unity, and Pitbor administrative area in the belly of the South Basin. When we talk about the hydrological effects of the South, one popular estimate is that one half of the Bahar al-Jebel annual discharge from the Lake Victoria is estimated to be lost annually through evapotranspiration in the South region. And that is about 30 billion cubic of water. That half of that does get lost. And so in terms of the entire ecosystem, there are four main components. One, you look at the Baro, Akopa Pitbo river basins, and that originate from the Ethiopian highlands. That is from the northeast. You also look at the Bahar al-Jebel coming from the Equatorial Lake into the south. That is one component of the subsystem in South Sudan. And then you go to Bahar al-Ghazal, Western Bahar al-Ghazal, and Western Equatoria, in the border of DRC and Central African Republic, where the Bahar al-Ghazal river tributary originated. That all of that form the South Sudan Nile water system, but they all converge into the south, in the sense that all of them flow into the south. And as you may have seen in the presentation done early on by myself or by Professor Elkhazin, when it comes to the atmospheric pressure, the south has a tremendous effect on the rain pattern across the Bahar al-Ghazal river basin as it relates to the Western Bahar al-Ghazal and Western Equatoria in the green belt. And then you have the Sobat also influence on the eastern side in terms of on the area of Buma Mountains and Pitbor. So all of that form the Nile water system in South Sudan, which sat as a belly of that water system.
And that was quite a good presentation. It gives a very well-rounded picture. The first question that we should ask: how did the set form itself? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
If you look at the cross-section of the Nile, if you get a knife and cut the Nile right in the middle from Kagera to the Delta, there is only one place where there is a dump, where there is a hole. The slope goes down and goes up again. And the physics tells us that water seeks its own level. So that dump had to be filled first before the Nile continues to go north. That's the reason why we have a Sud. Ecosystems balance themselves. You cannot tamper with them. It is like a car. You cannot pull out a tire and expect the car to go on three tires. You cannot take off the plugs and expect the engine to fire. That does not happen. So that is typical of ecosystem. They are integrated with each other. If you tamper with one, you could actually disturb the ecosystem and probably disturb it forever. Ecosystems are not only about water. It's about animals as well. It is about birds. You have a massive bird sanctuary in the Sud. If you tamper with that, the birds will go somewhere else. They will migrate. The animals will migrate. Look at the time of the Second Civil War and all the animals that were killed, especially in Jonglei State, where the soldiers at night will just go out and shoot a gazelle or two for meat. So all these elements and components of the ecosystem make what we call a system. And in any system, if you remove one part, important or not important, big or small, nature does not give anything for free. There is no way. And Balzac, the French philosopher, said, for nature to be mastered, nature must be obeyed. We have to obey nature. And the water in the Sud, it is not only water, as we said, but the water in the Sud is a wealth of South Sudan. The same way you have got oil underground, you have got this water overground, with one difference. Every barrel of oil that you take is gone. It is non-renewable resource. The water comes again and again and again with the rains. It is almost eternal. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deng and Professor Elkhazin. With this gifted nature environment and the water that you're talking, where did Jonglei come from? Jonglei Canal. What is Jonglei Canal and what benefits will South Sudan get out from Jonglei Canal if canal is have to be resumed or digged? I will go back to you again, Dr. Deng first, and then Professor will weigh in.
No, this time we are going to reverse it. You see, we were planning behind you. We planned behind you. That my son Deng will go first there, and then I will go first, and he will add, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Professor Elkhazin.
Right. Jonglei Canal is a colonial project. It was the colonial project when it started in 1904 by a British engineer who was in charge of water resources in Egypt. And it's a colonial project today in 2022. Let us have no mistake about that. Let us have no mistake about that. The canal came as an exploration. If you go to the old maps, I have a map here that dates back to 1923. I have about 60 maps of the old survey maps. Just north of Malakal, there was a town called Tawfiqiya. And there is a forest between Malakal and Tawfiqiya, which is called Tawfiqiya Forest. Tawfiqiya was named after the king Tawfiq, the son of Ibrahim, the son of Muhammad Ali Pasha, who invaded Sudan to take slaves and to take gold. So the Egyptians had a town in the name of their Qadif in South Sudan, just a little bit north of Malakal. Let us not forget that. Let's not forget that. And let me very quickly share something important with you. Rumbek, May 15, 2005. I and those who joined me in the bush and fought for more than 20 years have brought to you the CPA in a golden plate. Our mission is accomplished. It is now your turn, especially those who did not have a chance to experience bush life. When the time comes to vote at the referendum, it is your choice to determine your fate. Would you like to vote to be second-class citizen in your own country? It is absolutely your choice. John Garang, when the referendum came, it was 98.83 approving separation. You are now an independent country. We need to stand up. Jonglei Canal has got absolutely no blessings for South Sudan. It has got no return, technical, economical, or social. It is a project that was inspired by a British man when they were colonizing Egypt, and they looked upon South Sudan as if it is a jungle that belongs to them. So let us park that and put it at the back of our minds. Jonglei Canal, the designs were made so that either 4 billion cubic meters of water can be drained, or 10 billion cubic meters of water can be drained out of the 30 billion that Deng alluded to. But Jonglei Canal and the Sud are not localized. He talked about the green belt. Where is the green belt? It's Western Equatoria, Northern Uganda. Why? Why do we never hear of famines in Western Equatoria? The reason is the water evaporates from the Sud. It is taken by the northern winds and it pours as rain in Western Equatoria and Northern Uganda. Do you want to lose that? So the inception of Jonglei Canal was colonial. It was meant to drain water as and when needed. And the file was parked until 1946. In 1936, the British and the Egyptians signed an agreement and Egypt became an independent country. 10 years later, until they sorted out their stuff, I said, let us look at that, let us look at Tawfiqiyya and that water and do a little bit more about it and keep it at the back of our minds. I will talk later on why is the Jonglei Canal being raised now. Thank you very much. And if Deng has got something to add, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Elkhazin. If I have something to add in terms of history, it has to do with my childhood experience in the village of Duk, when the machine, the bucket wheel, showed up all of a sudden one time, cutting villages, some to the eastern bank and some to the western bank. And as a young boy who was herding cattle, I saw the manifestation of industrialization and colonialization all came together in that village of Duk from my eye as a young boy. And so what I realized later on through our leaders and elders was that the bucket wheel machine was sent from Egypt and Sudan to come to the village. Beyond the violence it was done to our natural environment, this was clearly an attempt by the foreign powers to control the water supply. The river, as you all know, and as Professor Elkhazin mentioned clearly when he was defining ecosystem, this is the story of Sat. It's a story of life cycle. It is on my research topic, I call it South Sudan lungs. There is an image that was published way back. The name was The Man of Commerce. The Man of Commerce image depicts the railway and the water system, the network of that, and really explain that as bones and arteries of the human body. When you could also apply that analogy of human bones and arteries to the case of Sat in the context of infrastructure, be it conceptual or real. When you are talking of roads network, future railway, when you look at Sat, Sat is the lungs that breathes into all of this infrastructure. And if South Sudan is to observe any transitions in economic trajectory and growth, it should realize that the Sat water resources has to be the camelback, has to be the store that break the camelback in that transition, so that it can stimulate economic growth. And so, from that experience of mine as a young man, today here I am pursuing a research. I challenge all of us, those in Egypt, those in the Sudan, as well as Ethiopia, to prioritize research, research on the Sat, research on the Bahar al-Khazal, research on the Soba River system. When we have all of this research, we should be able to go by evidence. And those research ought to be international and also ought to be national as well. Today is the 21st century. A lot of South Sudanese, both in the country and outside the country, are educated, and we have scientists in different fields. This is the time we should be able to prioritize research and be able to wait for evidence. But the evidence in the past has indicated that Jonglei Canal has tremendous negative impact on the ecosystem we were talking about earlier, on the people living in this ecosystem and who actually depend on the ecosystem services, the livestock, the fishery, and the animal migration that occurs seasonally. And so it's occurred to me that new research is needed in order for us to be able to see exactly how the resiliency of the communities can be enhanced and how the economic growth of a country like South Sudan can take up and can pick up from the utilization of its water in such a sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. As you put it, Professor Taj, that Jonglei Canal is a colonial project that will not benefit or give anything back to those in the area, in that place. And I believe Dr. John Garang is one of his main point of taking arms against the government of Sudan. Jonglei Canal was among of the issue, and that's why they stopped the digging of Jonglei Canal by that time. But now, some people think that Jonglei Canal will solve flooding problem in South Sudan. Is that true?
No, that's not true, because the same way the land is flooded, the rivers get flooded. In South Africa, as we speak, there are massive floods. South Africa did not turn around and drain the rivers. In Australia, where you come from,
Yes.
there are massive floods in certain parts of Australia. The Australians did not turn around and drain the rivers. In British Columbia, where I live in Canada, there are massive floods. Unbelievable floods. We did not drain our rivers. These are two different set of affairs. If you have got floods, you deal with the floods. You mitigate them. You look for solutions, engineering solutions and social solutions. Maybe one of the solutions, instead of draining the water, move the people. Just move the villages a couple of kilometers up. Relocate them. This leads me to defeating this fallacy of draining to stop flooding. There is a difference between clearing. If you have got an obstacle, you clear it. That has got no effect. Dredging, that's when you deepen the bed of the river so that you collect more water and it goes forward depending on the slope. And draining. If you dredge, you drain. As soon as you dig, you drain. And water goes in one direction. It is either stagnant or it goes in one direction. And the direction is north. As we speak now, the northern end of Jonglei Canal, the old canal, has collapsed. And water of South Sudan, as we speak, is draining just south of Sobat and into the Sobat, into Sobat mouth and into the main Nile. It is not tremendous. It is not a big thing, but it is an indication. It is a wake-up call. I will conclude by another wake-up call. I advise those of you who are with us and those who are behind the screen to Google Lake Chad, C-H-A-D, Chad the country. A lot of pictures will come out. A reoccurring picture is that of Lake Chad in 1964 and Lake Chad in 2020. Lake Chad in 2020 has shrunk to 5% of its size in 1964. God has his own ways, nature has its own ways. So if you have water, you better keep the water. Another example is the Aral Sea. The Aral Sea is in the southern parts of the Soviet Union, in one of those small countries. The Aral Sea is now called Aralkum Desert. It has changed from a sea into a desert, not a single drop of water. The Dead Sea, which is shared between Jordan and Israel, the Dead Sea has shrunk in its surface area by 42% between 1930 and now. So the fact that you have got abundant water today does not mean that you are going to have abundant water tomorrow. And if you don't thank God for his blessings, God is going to take away those blessings. We hope that we wake up. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, if I may add, the call for Jonglei Canal by some people as the only solution to the flooding in South Sudan is really a misdiagnosis of a cure for a disease. There are no evidence from previous studies that the Jonglei Canal could control the flooding in the Upper Nile basin. And so without evidence, what has been demonstrated, however, is the opposite of what it could do. And so, but let us back up a little bit and come to why do we want to come up with measures and intervention to control flooding? To what end? It is important to come back because the debate has been binary between whether the canal can be dug and control the flooding or the canal cannot be dug. But as a researcher, we go by evidence and research outcomes. And all the previous studies have not indicated that the Jonglei Canal is a solution rate. Here is what I would like us to get back to the overall mission of what we want to do. We want to develop a flood management system for the seasonally flooded population of the South Basin to reduce the risk of flood damage. For what? So that we have the construction of infrastructure. To do what? To enhance social welfare and sustainable economic development, while at the same time preserving the ecosystem services and intrinsic value of the site that we talked earlier. If this is what we want to do, so that we all value and balance the trade-off between human life, whose life have been affected by flooding, and also whose life depend almost 100% on the local environment that is sustained by the site ecosystem. We also want to look at the biodiversity in the site. And as you all know, site, especially the permanent boundaries, has been designated a Ramsar site by the UNESCO. You also look at animal migration seasonally and how an intervention could impede them and affect them. With no water or with limited water, what is going to happen to the wildlife? Are they going to starve? Are they going to migrate outside South Sudan? But there is potential value, both economic value and cultural value, in preserving that wildlife and ensuring that there is potential ecosystem in the future, even though it might not be realized today. There is a group that has worked on the evaluation of economic value of the site ecosystem, and it is in terms of $1 billion. This can be realized only if the site is preserved. And so when we talk about Jonglei Canal, based on previous studies and the finding that has been published, there are times it looks like the case where you have the cure that is worse than the disease. Otherwise, there are also other issues that are related to the issue of flooding. It is not only flooding. The other issue is that we have limited access to safe water due to limited and reliable water supply infrastructure. We also have extractive industry that is happening within the South Basin or within the vicinity of that, and that affects water quality and public health issues. We are also dealing with transboundary hydropolitics with potential restart of the Jonglei Canal. All of this come into the water planning system. So as a sovereign country, I ask that we step back a little bit and look at this in a holistic manner. South Sudan's water resources is more precious than oil, as Professor Elkhazin pointed out clearly. These are the resources that can be the engine of South Sudan economic growth. And it is important that it is put in a plan. Even though the Jonglei Canal can control a bit of flooding from the Bahar al-Jabal, if there are any indication to that, then look at the multiplicity of the sources of flooding. One flooding comes from the east, from the Buma Mountain, from the Murule area. That has nothing to do, the Jonglei Canal cannot control that, even a bit of it. You also have a flooding coming from the Baro, Akopa, Pibor river system that connect with Machar marshes. That flooding, again, even a bit of it cannot be controlled. But let us step back again and look at the Bahar Khazal from the west, the Bahar Khazal river system, that also caused flooding within the Bahar Khazal regions, and also with water flowing into the sun. So when you even take Jonglei Canal for a ride and just simply say, okay, if it does control any flooding, what source of flooding does it control and how much of it? If we turn a blind side on the history of it and try to take it at face value, you also realize that it falls short of what we are talking about here. The fragility and the complexity of the Sat has also increased since 1904. Today we are dealing with a different circumstances. We are dealing with man-made climate change. We are dealing with global warming. We are talking about more than 100 years ago. Things have changed. An idea that was brought up in 1904 for a completely different purposes at a different era had to be really evaluated and studied, analyzed by many studies for any group to come out and to support it. And so I challenge all of you to look at what is out there. Douglas Johnson did a study in 1970s, even though his studies were interrupted by the war. But one conclusion that he came up with is very important. I'm going to quote here. He said that his research is the reconstruction of the local flood in the upper Nile part of the South Basin. The people now living in the area to the east of the South wetland, parallel to the proposed Jonglei Canal, recall major flood and drought in the 19th and 20th centuries. The historical and contemporary sources of the flooding in the basin are multiple and varied. There is no silver bullet, therefore, as a panacea to the flooding. This is why it is important that we look back and realize that there are many institutions. It's not only water, it's not only Ministry of Water, Resource and Irrigation, that of Environment, that of Roads, that of Agriculture, that of Economic Planning, that of Mineral, that of Oil. All of these institutions should not look at this issue as the issue of Ministry of Water. Otherwise, it will be in silos. All of these institutions need to come together in an interwoven manner so that the planning is holistic and the approach understand the complexity and fragility of all of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yep. Professor, his hand is up. Yep.
Yeah, just a quick addition. Let us ask ourselves the simple question: what was the Jonglei Canal designed for during the 70s and 80s? When you design, when you have maps and you have a design for a house, you cannot take the same maps and build a tukul or build a store. It just doesn't happen. In engineering, it doesn't happen. The canal was designed for one reason, and that is to drain water, stage 1 and stage 2. So even if we feel that there is need or value added, we need to take a look at the design and redesign for the objective. Because when you want to design, you first determine your objective. What do you want? Do you want the road? Do you want a villa? Do you want a store? Or do you want a tukul? And then the design will follow. If you decide you want a tukul and next day, morning you want to build a villa, you have got to get a new set of maps. That's the first point. The second point that's not much spoken about is the Sud and international law. We are no longer under the wing of Omar al-Bashir. We are no longer under the wing of Egypt. South Sudan is an independent country in the arena. Leave aside who is ruling and how he's ruling. At the end of the day, the land and the people and the skies are those of South Sudan. They cannot be sold. They are there from here to eternity. So we have got to look into international law. There are two agreements that we must all be aware of. We must all study. The first agreement is the Vienna Convention on the cessation of countries. That is typically our case. South Sudan was part of Sudan. There were agreements signed, including the 1959 horrible agreement and others. And then South Sudan went away its own way, and rightly so. So what are the obligations? Are we bound by the 1959 agreement? Can the Egyptians take us to the International Criminal Court, or take us to the International Court of Justice, or to arbitration? We need to study that. The second one has entered into force, and now it is a binding United Nations convention, and it talks about the rights of people on transboundary rivers for non-navigational purposes. When 1959 agreement was signed, Sudan was given 18.5 billion cubic meters of water. That was their share. That was the share for the old Sudan. Today, that is the share for Sudan North and for South Sudan. Where is that water? What happened to that agreement? Why are we not talking about it? So the regional legal framework and the international legal framework are important to look at and look into. Deng talked about Ramsar. Ramsar is something like the equivalent of UNESCO on wetlands. That's what they do, wetlands. The Sud is the largest wetland in all of Africa. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. So what is the obligation if we want to tamper with that? The other one, even UNESCO is now in the evaluation stage. The application has been made, and UNESCO are evaluating to declare the Sud a World Heritage. I mean, just look at that. With all the mess we have in South Sudan, we have got something that could be the World Heritage, and we want to drain it. That will be very stupid. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I will be yelling back the microphone to my colleague Majok Makur to proceed with some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, my brother Isaac. Dr. Deng Majok, you're welcome on board, and Professor Taj. Thank you so much for creating time to come on this platform today and share your thoughts about this critical topic. Actually, when South Sudan gained independence, many people were not aware of Jonglei Canal. And on the 28th of February 2022, the Vice President, Deng, popped up and announced the resumptions of Jonglei Canal. And on his statement, he mentioned the reason to why he called for resumption of Jonglei Canal is because of flooding. And he mentioned critically, and I quote his statement, that flood has actually displaced many people from two states, that is Jonglei State and Unity State. And on that account, Deng Majok, you have handled it critically, and you have actually given, even if we allowed Jonglei Canal to move on, what will happen to the other water outlets that might come from Puma administrative area? And Professor have talked about that critically. Now, many South Sudanese are wondering, and they have read, those who love reading, they have read a lot of research, and they have seen those research agree unanimously that Jonglei Canal is a destruction to South Sudan rather than a development. And I've read your research or your article, Dr. Deng Majok, and I've seen it. The same thing to the speech or presentation which was given by the Professor Taj last week or 2 weeks ago. Now, many South Sudanese want to hear what are some of the challenges, what are some of the impact, the negative impact this Jonglei Canal project will inflict it on South Sudan, both economically and politically, considering the foreign policy of the country with the Sudan and the Egypt. Our audience will love if you can highlight some of the impact negatively that will be caused by Jonglei Canal. And on this point, I can go with Professor Taj. You can handle that first, and then Dr. Deng Majok will follow. Thank you.
Right. Before I go into the technical narrative, and if you have got your contacts on the ground, maybe double check with Honorable Guy Deng. He may now have some change of opinion. And I'm hinting at that because I did not talk directly to him, but I have talked to someone who has talked to him. Also, those who are listening, there is a very good man by the name of Honorable Philip Son. He comes from the area where the northern end of the Jonglei Canal is at. Very good man, very well informed. He worked for 4 or 5 years on the Jonglei Canal project when Gama Hassan, the man of the Mahdi, from the Mahdi tribe, when he was the commissioner of Jonglei. There was one time where a South Sudanese was actually the commissioner of Jonglei Canal project. That's how ignorant the people were. So there are some good news coming out. Those of you who are interested, or maybe your media can actually host Honorable Philip. He's a member of parliament, very well informed person. He's a patriot. There is no doubt about that. Right, let me just enumerate a few things. The first thing is there is in political science, there is what we call resilience. Resilience is that reserve that you have in a nation where you resort to when the going gets tough. So if you have got money in the bank, you wouldn't say, why is my money sitting there? Let me go and spend it. You need to keep that money for as and when you lose your job, for as and when you need to repair your house. That's a simplistic approach to resilience. There is also what we call social security. The same way we talk about food security, the same way we talk about physical security, economic security, we talk about water security. We don't want to go thirsty tomorrow. The third point, look at South Sudan. Where do you have massive cultivation? Where do you have something like the Jazeera Port, like the Managil, like the southern United States, like the Ukraine, like Russia, where you are producing millions and millions and millions of tons? Where do you have that? It is mostly subsistence economy and subsistence agriculture. The men take their guns and they take the cattle and they go rearing from Hafir to Hafir, and the women who are mostly doing the subsistence cultivation. We had the Anzara project very many years back, but it collapsed. So tell me where there are 10,000, 15,000 acres of land that is constantly irrigated 2 seasons in South Sudan. Not one. So to answer your question, if I have water, I would like to keep it for myself before I open the channels and run it to another country. That's the first point. The second point is a little bit delicate. This is not the first time that this happens. It happened in 2008, 2009. I was there under the World Bank, and I was advising the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. And then I was advising Brother Coleman Young when he was governor. And my office was directly beside the office of Manawa Peter Jatkot. He was my focal point down there, and I was working with him. All those are good people. And I think what we need is an awareness program. I can divert a little bit from your question and tell you that people are listening. I'm in contact with Dr. Barnaba Marial. Barnaba Marial talked to the president. The president wants me to come to South Sudan in person to create awareness, to talk technical. I intend to take some of our sons who are in that field as well. This is not only an old man job. And I will go there. Unless they don't send me the tickets, but I will go there. This is not about money. So the fact that we now have a listening ear, even though just the tip of the ear, I am happy with that. We're going to creep and go to the middle of the ear. We have got to raise our voice. To answer your question categorically, Majok, there is absolutely no benefit whatsoever for the people of South Sudan. It erodes their water security. It erodes their sovereignty, that a foreign country brings in equipment and builds offices and they want to drain the water to take it to another country. Go back to the Nile Basin Initiative. It's a very important tool. The Nile Basin Initiative, we had got 5 countries that signed on the Corporate Framework Agreement. 4 of them ratified the agreement. Egypt killed and continues to kill that initiative. South Sudan has not signed on the agreement yet. Do we belong to the North? Do we belong to the Mediterranean? Or do we have brothers and sisters in the Lakes region? It is a betrayal for them that we are not signing on the cooperative agreement. The Nile Basin is the only major basin in the world. It is the longest river in the world, and it hasn't got a regulating cooperative agreement. I'm taking you back to international law coupled with Jonglei Canal. So all of us, we need to know the fact that Jonglei Canal is not about South Sudan. It is not about the welfare of South Sudan, neither economically nor from a water security point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ujungma Kurmalak, for this opportunity and to be able to share the screen with you here today. I just want to echo some of Professor Elkhazin's points that he raised. As far as the benefit that the Jonglei Canal could bring, again, as I referred to previous studies before. But there is one thing that I want to address here. There seemed to be a confusion as to what Dr. John Grang studied with the Jonglei Canal. There seemed to be a confusion out there as to whether Dr. John Grang supported the canal or not. But this shouldn't be confusing at all, because Dr. John Grang did his PhD thesis shortly before the Sudanese People Liberation Army, Sudanese People Liberation Movement, launched that revolution. And we know the results of that revolution as far as the Jonglei Canal, and especially in respect to the bucket wheel. What Dr. John Grang studied and his thesis is out there is in the open. He looked at Jonglei Canal as a project that was going to be implemented by 2 great powers at that time. Egypt, with the backing of the United Kingdom, and of course Sudan. And we were part and parcel of Sudan. So Dr. John Grang took the Jonglei Canal as it was proposed by these 2 great powers, and that it was going to be inevitable that it was going to be implemented. And he wanted to see if there were going to be agricultural opportunities out of the Jonglei Canal as a project that was already decided by those powers and was going to be implemented whatsoever. And so he wanted to see if the mechanized agriculture, he used one of the concepts called transformative path, where you mechanize agriculture to the level that happened perhaps in the Sudan and in Egypt. But all of those agricultural transformation happened because these 2 countries have dams, have lake, and have waters. that were used to irrigate all of those places. So Dr. Jonglei did a study. It was a scientific research that did not get to whether he personally support or not, but as a project that was coming through South Sudan. And it should be clear where his position stands in respect to his vision and his role in the SPLM and what the SPLM stood for. One of the negative effect of the Jonglei Canal that the previous studies have indicated is the potential of changing the rain pattern, not only within South Sudan, again, as Professor Elkhazin referred to the green belt in Western Equatoria, how the sun evaporations or evapotranspirations through the atmospheric pressure become rain in the green belt. And the same thing also, there is a group that is doing a study as we speak in trying to see the connection between SAT and the Ethiopian highland, whether the rainfall in Ethiopian highland that feed Lake Tana, that is the source of Blue Nile, actually does get rain from the SAT. So there is a regional effect that is being investigated, let alone the rainfall effect or the precipitation effect that SAT had in South Sudan. So that is a major impact. There are, of course, a lot of social impact, economical impact that we can get into if we have time.
Let us go back to Dr. John Garang, and thank you for bringing this up. Dr. John Garang commissioned the battalion to go and disable the Rupel. The Rupel is that huge machine that was dredging. That's not all what he did. That's not all what he did. He did something far more brilliant because, 5 people, 1 person could actually disable that. He captured and he took to Ethiopia 5 from the CCI company, Compagnie Construction Internationale, the French company who was doing the dredging, the engineering company. At that time, the late Dr. Justin Yaj, who is a lifetime friend, was the representative of the SPLA in Paris, in France. So Justin contacted me because CCI contacted him. And he said, Taj, you know what happened? Yeah, I said, yes, I know what happened. Beautiful. And I went in between to see what can be done to release the 5 CCI Khawajas who were captured by the SPLA and taken to Ethiopia. And the request of Dr. Koin Garang is that all the Caterpillar equipment that was in the canal is to be given to the SPLA. D7s, D8s, D9s, graders, scrapers, all the Caterpillar, I think there were 45 pieces of Caterpillar. So I got all the pieces of equipment. I sent them to Justin Yaj, and the trade-off was made. The Khawajas, the 5 Khawajas were released, and all the Caterpillar equipment went to the SPLA. They did not use it as earth-moving equipment. They did modifications and they used it as tanks. Sit in a D7, nothing will get you. Even if you get a bomb, it will not get you. So Dr. John Garang he was one of the most brilliant men I met in my life. I have known him ever since he was in Busari in 1972. He's a patriot of the first degree. He would never do anything to the people of South Sudan. But that is the story of John Garang and the canal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor and Dr. Deng Majok. Actually, you have answered the questions accordingly. And I hope South Sudanese who are listening will get the full context of why Jonglei Canal should not be resumed and why it should not even be in the equations of the developmental project in South Sudan. We have seen the issue of flood. What are some of the things or some of the modalities that you can suggest to the government that can reduce flooding. And we all know flooding is a seasonal event, or is a seasonal event. It is not like permanently. What are some of the modalities that you can lay out or you propose to the government of South Sudan that the government can invest in order to reduce flood in the most affected areas of Upper Nile and Lake states in particular? Dr. Deng Majok, you take the lead, and then the Professor Taj will follow you.
Thank you once again, Majok Makur, for that question. I like to address it in 3 separate categories. Something I call the short term, and the medium term, and the long term basis. In the response that I wrote to VP, Vice President Taban Deng, and Honorable Manawa Peter, I also indicated those suggestions as well. Also in a letter, an open memo that I wrote to His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit in 2019, I cautioned the country to look at such as a blessing and as a national resources in a context of national security. And I also hinted to the imperative of stepping back as a country and coming up with a holistic approach to the flooding management system. But since you have asked me today about it, I will go ahead and share some of these suggestions. And as Elkhazin mentioned, that Dr. Jonglei was a man who could not temper with the integrity and sovereignty of the people, so is His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit. He is a man who was also part of the SPLM, has always been top leadership, and was also part and parcel of those decisions that were made when he was second to Dr. John Grant. And from all the presentation we have been doing, the letters we have written, and the arrival of Professor Elkhazin, who have known this generation of South Sudan for a long time, and has the integrity of someone who have lived in South Sudan for a quarter of his own life, 20 years, and has worked on the issues of the Nile for half a century. He has credibility, and he has colleagues of his own within South Sudan system. So his arrival in this has really put a huge positive footprint, and we are being heard. So the first thing that we should do, South Sudan as a country has a constitution, and the constitution recognizes every South Sudanese as a citizen of South Sudan. And so if one citizen of South Sudan is suffering, let's say in this case from flooding, he or she had the right to be relocated to the other part of the country where she or he can survive the atrocities from natural disaster. And so the first proposal is that we need to have a relocation program at the national level, a relocation program that has the equation of investment. It has to be funded by the government, both in terms of funding and also the investment in form of information. And that program would locate the most affected population. Let's say in the case of Jonglei. Jonglei has flooding coming from the Bahar al-Jabal. But if you move east slightly to where the Pitbull administrative area is still within Jonglei, there are high ground, especially when you are considering Bor and Tuch County and also Duke County. They can move east. There is a place called Kadian. That place is on high ground. There are also places along the Bor area. There is a place called Baidi. There's also a place called Anyidi. All of these are counties within Jonglei. People can be moved to those places. When it comes to Upper Nile also, especially toward the east, they have some higher ground that the affected population can be moved. When you are talking of unity state, again, there are counties, and if there are no counties, people in unity state, citizens of unity state, can cross to the other state within Bahar Kazal. In Lake State, they can go to northern Bahar Kazal, etc. So phase two is construction of higher and safer dikes around towns, especially in areas and counties that are partially submerged. We also need to have these designs in such a way that they do not create, I'm talking about dikes and all of these embankments that are done. They need to be designed in a way that they don't create maladaptation. Maladaptation is where you shift vulnerability. By trying to intervene and create resiliency, you instead create maladaptation. So that is what we should do with short-term basis. Now, on a medium-term basis, continue to invest in a relocation program to higher grounds in all of these states. That was just an example that I indicated. You also want to invest more and more on bigger dikes and safer dikes as well. You also want to create perhaps minor channelization in areas where there used to be a natural flow or natural channel of water. Create channelization there to ensure that the water flow into the main Nile system. On the long-term basis, and it cross with the medium term, I propose that we renovate the Fuller Dam around Nimali area. It is in bad shape. It is no longer operational. South Sudan, there is already a location for it. All it needs is to expand this and to renovate it so that it is of the state of the art. And it can be used for hydropower. And it can also be used to modulate some of the flooding. I also propose an artificial lake in the triangular area of the Upper Nile, Jonglei, and Pijbor administrative area. That lake can serve many purposes, including controlling the flooding from precipitation and local terrains. It can also be used for fishery. It can be used for human settlement and for future modernization of towns and cities around that dams. It can also be used, artificial lake. It can be a combination of 3 dams or what have you, given studies. These are things that I am proposing, but they have to be preceded with scientific study of the soil, economic, social, environmental impact. So I will stop here, and perhaps I can circle back to those later. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Deng. Before I start, do you have an idea what is the life expectancy in South Sudan? It is 58 years. Our life expectancy in Canada is about 79 to 80 for women and 78 to 79 for men. That's the problem. The wives live longer than the husbands. So is this whole thing, is this really a priority? When our life expectancy is only 58 years as per 2021? In the presentation, I think it was not the presentation, it was one of the webinars where I did survey of what the people want in 7 payams of 7 counties of the 11 in Jonglei. And the single request was for a midwife so that the babies do not die and the mothers do not die. And when I was talking in Iwai, in Urur County, there were 17 community leaders, men and women. All 17 raised their hand when I said, who lost a child or a mother? When you have that, when you have this lack of basic services, and you want to go grand to talk about canals, to talk about equipment, to talk about draining water. So let us put this at the back of our mind, because this is not a priority. Even if it is valid, even if it will bring gold to South Sudan, this is not a priority. For somebody like me who traveled crisscross South Sudan, there is not a corner that I did not go to. Once you leave Juba, there is nothing. There is no development. There are no asphalt roads. There are no good schools. And there is no security. So let us park this, but put it at the back of our mind as an overall caution that the entire issue of Jonglei Canal with Egypt, with whatever happened, that's not a priority for us now. And then coming to the floods, to address the question. We have got the constant and the variable. We have got the permanent and the occasional. There are two different things. The rivers are constant. The rivers are permanent. Sobat shall flow. Siu, the Busari shall flow, and they will form the Jur. The Jur will flow. The Lul will flow. Kir will flow. Those are the constants. The floods are occasional. There are different modalities and ways of dealing with the constant, if they need some doing, and with the variable, if the variable needs some doing. My son Deng, he alluded to the dikes. Look at Holland. Holland has built dikes to fend off the sea. So there is great wealth of how do you deal with dikes, how do you build dikes. A simplistic approach is that you command satellites so that they take imagery, and you know where the runoffs are, you know where the catchments are, and then you interrupt those and you direct the water to a route. If you want to avoid overflooding in the rivers, in the main rivers, maybe you can consider diverting or storing water from the tributaries. Because there is no river that is just standalone, you know, it springs from the ground and it runs. There are always tributaries that are coming through. I have a map of all the rivers and tributaries in South Sudan. When you look at it, you will wonder, where is the land? Wherever you look, there is water. Two basins, as we are talking about water, Bahr al-Ghazal Basin and Sobat Basin. Bahr al-Ghazal Basin is entirely owned by South Sudan because all the water pours, all the rain pours within South Sudan. A source country, South Sudan has now become a source country for the Nile waters. So that's our water. Nobody has got anything to, not the Kenyans, not the Central African Republic, not Uganda, nobody else. But then the neglected river, Sobat. Sobat has the potential and actually contributes 15% of the total discharge of the Nile water. 12 billion cubic meters of water per year. As Deng said, its major source is the Baro River, which originates from southern Ethiopia, SWMPR. The southern region of Ethiopia is like South Sudan. It is economically underdeveloped. But if we can put a dam in the highlands of the Baro, where there are rocks, you cannot build a dam inside in the Jonglei plains because it's either sand or mud. Otherwise, you need to do what they call piling, and then you drive the piles until you get to the rocks. That's very expensive. That alone will cost hundreds of millions. So you cannot build the dam on Sobat inside South Sudan. You can only build it in Ethiopia. But if you can do that, you can actually get 12 billion cubic meters of water. If you take a small share of 2 to 3 billion cubic meters of water per year, you can cultivate the entire Jonglei plains. That's half the Jazeera project of the Sudan. That's the granary of South Sudan. There is no other place in entire South Sudan where you can have mass production of grains. So now I am coupling the water to the subsistence and the survival of the people. And then talking about draining the water and not moving the people. The area of South Sudan is 650,000 square kilometers, or about that, 625, 650. The population is 11 to 12 million people. This is one of the smallest densities of population per square kilometer in the world. We are not short of land to relocate. And then, what do you want to relocate? All of us, we know the pattern of the life of the pastoralists. The men take their guns, they take the cattle, and they move from one hafir to another, from one river to another. And they leave the women to cultivate about half an acre to maximum 1 acre around the huts to feed the family. That's subsistence cultivation. That's the modus operandi. That is the way cultivation is done. If we want food security, and if we want to export, and if we want economic value from our water, we need to go for big projects. The only place where the slope of the land, the abundance of the water is there, it is the Jonglei Plains. So rather than thinking small, rather than thinking petty, rather than thinking in the way of someone who hasn't got alternatives, let us think strategically and then use holistic approach. Our problem is that there is no whole of government approach in South Sudan. Everybody, the vice president is also his own, and the president and the minister and whatever have you. We need the government to come together, and we have what we call a whole of government approach to the issue of water, Jonglei Canal, and the floods. One last thing is the United Nations is on board now. The United Nations is concerned, and we hope that the concern will continue. They are looking into explanations, they are looking into ways. Even the people in the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, there are some very good people. I'm in contact with one of the top people, and they know that Jonglei Canal is the wrong thing to do. So to answer your question, Majok, there is no connection whatsoever between this canal or any canal under the sun and between the floods. The canals are about water that is running, the floods are about water that's coming from top. The approach to the two modalities is different. I like the approach of Deng Majok. He's thinking strategically, he's thinking long term. We have a problem that we all need to consider, maybe not now, but for the future. We have no money. Not only we don't have no money, nobody wants to give us money. There is $120 million that was given as a grant by the World Bank relating to water, floods, whatever have you, but they said $120 million over 5 years. So that takes you down to about $25 million per year. That's not a lot of money. Let me share a final word with you on this subject, unless you have something else. In political science, we have the term donor fatigue. Donor fatigue, when the donors, which is the West, there is nothing called international community. It is a term, I don't know from where it came. It is the West that has got the money, and it is the West that can twist our arms. But we talk about donor fatigue is when the Khawajas no longer want to pay money. So I was talking to someone from Carter Center. Carter Center is one of the advisors of the American government. And a couple of times in a presentation, I said donor fatigue. And then when it was his turn to talk, he said, I beg to differ with my friend Tai. It is no longer donor fatigue, it is compassion fatigue. That's far more serious than donor fatigue. Because donor fatigue, the people could come back and open the safe and give you money. Compassion fatigue, they have lost interest. Regrettably, that's the stage you are in now. So there is no money coming, and I mean money that has an impact. These small projects of 5 million, look at the Egyptians. The Egyptians signed an agreement with the government of South Sudan for $26.4 million. $26.4 million. And I think this was the catch, this was the bait. 6.4 of those 26.4 was going for capacity building and so on. 20 million was going for Hafiz, not one Hafiz was dug. Not even one hole, not even one hufra, not even one bucket of a bulldozer has happened. So there is no money. That's why I would like to propose a friendly amendment to what Deng has suggested. Let us have the short-term planning for what is within the capacity of the government of South Sudan. And it is the government of the day. There is nothing we can do about it. It is the choice of the people. And we all have to work with the government. If we like them or not, it's a different story. We have got no option. But let us talk about the short term, which is within our financial means, our technical means, and our implementation means. And then also plan for the long term for us, and when the compassion fatigue is gone and we have got some compassion, the donor fatigue is gone and we have got some money, then we can pump money into larger projects. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Deng Majok and Professor Taj. You have actually answered it adequately. And you have concluded it rightly, Professor, that South Sudan got no money. Literally, South Sudan is suffering from several diseases. And all these diseases, we are just trying to look at how we can handle them, especially on the leadership perspective. And to Professor, thank you so much for your service to South Sudan. I've heard you have done a lot to that country, and you are continuing doing a lot to them. And by the God grace, you will always live longer so that you can continue giving your service to your fellow human being, and especially your fellow countrymen, South Sudan. Thank you on that note. The issue of international community is actually a political term. You have said clearly it is West, but they call it international community to look inclusive by other people, like World War I, World War II. Literally, when you look at all those world wars, which we study in the history, and our children are busy now looking into those history, South Sudan was not involved in what people call world war, but they term it in that way to suit the interests of political elite. The last question before I hand it over to my co-host, we have seen how Egyptian government is desperately trying to champion a lot of projects in South Sudan. And the intention is for them to be given green light to move on with the colonial project, as you put it rightly before, Professor. Do you think, Professor Taj, South Sudan government have a strength to stand against this pressure from Egyptian government? And also, rumors said that the VP, Taban Denga, signed a document that allowed Egyptians to carry on what they call drainage with some of the lake in South Sudan. You'll also talk about that. What is this term drainage mean? If Taban have actually given them green light to move on to the cleaning and the drainage of the lake in South Sudan, do they have strength Do they have courage? Do they have economic power to stand against these persuasions and also pressure from Egyptian government? Thank you so much. Take the lead, Professor, and then Dr. Deng Majok will follow. Thank you.
Thank you for at last bringing the elephant in the room. That's the elephant in the room. And I was waiting to see if you are a warrior or if you are a panditaki. You are a warrior. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.
Before I answer the crux of your question, why are the Egyptians panicking now? There is a reason. The 1959 agreement gave 55.5 billion cubic meters of water as measured at the high dam to Egypt and 18.5 billion cubic meters of water to Sudan. Sudan never used more than 12 billion cubic meters. So every year since 1964, between 6 to 6.5 billion cubic meters of water, from the share of South Sudan, were going free of charge to Egypt. Okay, what changed now? What changed the GERD, the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, with a massive lake of 74 billion cubic meters storage and can be enlarged? Sudan can actually agree with Ethiopia to store that water or part of it for when they need it. That's one of the main reasons why the Egyptians are so irritated. The possible loss of that 6.5 billion cubic meters every year is really nagging them. That's the first one. The second one, the Egyptians did some dredging in the Siwa and the Busari. Those of you who are from Bahr al-Ghazal, the Siwa and the Busari, they meet around Masna Talib, the canning factory, just before you get to Wow. And then they go on to form the Jur, and it bends right and it goes to the west. So it started dredging that actually. And with a German woman, very good woman, she had her heart with the people of South Sudan. We did intensive awareness in 2008, 2009. And then the security situation stopped them and they stopped the dredging. There is a difference between clearing, dredging, and draining. These are three different technical terms. Dredging is when you bring what we call a karaka or a drag line. This huge machine, it has a long bucket and it has a long structure to take the soil and put it far away from the river. That's called the drag line or a karaka. In big rivers, that's the only way. There is no other way. You put it in a pontoon, a floating pontoon. So you put it in a jetty, put it in a pontoon, and then it goes in the middle of the river, and it does that. And that's dredging. Once you dredge, you drain. The draining is the water itself leaving the place it was in and going somewhere else. And that's what they want. If the area of Lake No, as they want to do now, you will hear Bantio. Already there is a construction site. They have built the construction site in Bantio. Why do you build a construction site unless you want to have construction? You don't build a construction site and go home. Who gave the permission? The big question mark. And then what do they want to construct? There is a document from the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. If you don't have it, I will send it to you. The document says they are assembling equipment to dredge Bahr al-Ghazal Basin into Lake No. Question: why was Lake No called Lake No? Very strange name. The reason is very simple. There is no lake. There is no lake at the location. And when the British found that there was no lake, they said, there is no lake. And then our people, the English Juba, they turned it into Lake No. So what is it? It is a collection point of the Elkhazin basin to go into the main Nile. So if you dredge Bahr al-Ghazal basin and bring the water to Lake No, not one drop of that water is going to stay in Lake No. All that water to the last drop is going to go into the main Nile and is going to go north. So we need to be careful about that. You had another question. Do you recall what the second question was? Majok has left.
Yeah, Majok, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah. The use of water. If you put a dam in on the Sobat, you can actually generate between 300 megawatt of electricity to 750 megawatt of electricity. That's enough to put lights all over the Eastern Nile. So you can reserve water for hydropower. And this takes us to something very, very important that you need to be aware of. The science of water is only two departments. The first department is called hydrology, and the second department is called hydraulics. Hydrology is about the discharge of the water, the quantity of the water. Hydraulics is about the energy in the water, the head. You keep the water up, bring it down into propellers, turbines, and the turbines operate the generators, and you have electricity. So there is a difference between hydrology and hydraulics. We need to be careful about those both, and we need to study not only the quantity of water, where it goes, what do we do with it, but what energy could come out of water other than the Fula. I mean, what is in the Fula really is nothing to talk about. The Germans have given South Sudan a proposal. You can generate anywhere between, I think, 270 megawatt to up to 700 megawatt at the Fula Rapids, depending on how much you want to invest. The same problem is there is no money for that now, so we don't want to dream too much. And then irrigation. Why don't we use the water for irrigation? Survey is now extremely. I can do survey with my phone, wherever I am. I can get the coordinates in the phone, and I can get the elevation of a point on the phone in 1 second. And this has been done when I was designing Hafir. There are natural gravity slopes where the water would flow exactly like the Jazeera plantation in Sudan North. So we can make use of the water. And then one other thing that not many people are thinking about. Do you know that Saudi Arabia is producing water by desalination? They are purifying the water from the Red Sea, and they have got bottled water factories from that desalinated water. There is a very small factory, I understand, somewhere in Juba about that. Why don't we do mass production? Why don't we have 10 factories producing 10 billion liters per year and exporting it? So there is a lot of room for innovation. If there is a will, there is a way. So what we need to do is actually to generate the will. Probably the last point for me to conclude is that civil consultation, civil society consultation is important. We have got a voice. And I always give the example of Jesus Christ. One, even in the cross, he meant something. He died, and the whole Christian world is wearing the cross now. So don't underestimate the power of one. Don't underestimate what the one person can actually do. And trust me, you will sleep better at night when you ask yourself, did I really do my role as a citizen and you answer yes, you will sleep better. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think Dr. Deng, you can take over.
Would you mind to repeat the question again, please?
Yeah, thank you. The question is like there are two parts. There is question part A is asking, do South Sudan government have a courage and economic power to stand against Egyptians' pressure, and why Egyptian government are so panicking, like they are sponsoring every hospital project in South Sudan, they are sponsoring police in the courtesy of iRadio yesterday. Egyptian government pledged to organize the police forces in the country. And why are they doing all this? The reason is for them to be given green light to commend the project of Jonglei Canal. Do our government have that courage to stand before that, considering in the mind that we have a certain monster disease called corruption in the country? Any country can bribe South Sudanese in order to get away whatever you want. The second part is the definitions of the three terms, which Professor defined them adequately: drainage, cleanings, and stretching. Thank you.
Yes, I believe Professor Elkhazin, if you, now that there are more clarity to the second question, did you want to add before I weigh in with few remarks?
Thank you very much. Yes, I think thank you for giving me the opportunity. As I said, when you asked the question, this was the elephant in the room. Before I answer the question with the specifics of South Sudan, I want to give you the example of Israel. Israel are 8 million people. They have been standing in the face of 220 million Arabs since 1948, until they finally now got 5, 6, 7 Arab countries who actually have diplomatic relations with them. So in the primary place, it is the will. If the government of South Sudan has the will to stand in the face of Egypt. Egypt is 105 million people. They are the third most populous country in Africa. They have a massive gross domestic product. And they are receiving quite a bit of aid. And water for them is a matter of life and death. They have started a massive desalination project, but you can never desalinate water at an economic benefit, an economic way, if you compare it with running water of pure running water of a river that is not polluted like the Nile. So it all depends. You mentioned corruption. In 2006, 2007, there was a corruption case, and some good people worked together and they aborted the whole thing. I don't have documents proof in my hand, so I wouldn't go more than that. Lack of knowledge is one thing. I give credit actually to the government now. They want to call me. They want me to come to Cuba and to do presentations and to do awareness, which I'm willing to do. So admitting that they need technical help is a very good step forward. If you take it from an army point of view, the Ethiopian army is not a match to the Egyptian army. But you cannot fly over from Egypt, you fly over Sudan. Where would they come? They have to fly over Sudan. Maybe to Libya first and then into Sudan and then into South Sudan. This will trigger the whole world against them. When they were talking about bombarding the Gerd, people laughed at them. The Ethiopian army is no match. If Egypt wants to take Ethiopia, they can take it in 3 days. However, to demolish the Gerd, they have got to have a special type of bombs that go to the foundation of the dam. Because this is where the coast has gone. The top can be rebuilt again. But you have, and the Egyptians don't have that kind of bombs, and they wouldn't go to that extent. So it all depends on how solid the leadership, the ruling parties. It all depends on how aware they are of the long-term consequences. It all depends on the civic sense, the sense of nationalism. I have been colonized by the Brits and the Egyptians since 1989 until 1956, and then by the Arabs in the north from 1956 to 2011. Do I want to continue to be colonized in one way or the other? And economic colonization is as bad as physical colonization on the ground. So Egypt is, I think it is the fourth strongest army in Africa. So if you are talking about firepower, we are no match to them. If you are talking about population, we are no match to them. But this is our land. If the people fought not only 2 wars, just go to the history of the Zandi and the king of the Zandi and the stand that he made, the rebellion of the Nuers. The whole thing did not start with Joseph Lago or John Garang. It goes far deeper. Blood was spilled over the land of South Sudan. If the South Sudanese don't preserve that, they will be betraying those who died. And as I concluded in my presentation in one of the times, anyone who tampers with the Sud waters and the Nile waters in South Sudan is definitely committing high treason. So we should all raise our voice and encourage our government that, for heaven's sake, don't let us get colonized again through the back door. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Majok Marku, for that questions and also for the great and detailed response from Professor Elkhazin. When natural catastrophe occurs, tremendous damage happens. This has been the case in 2019 flooding, in 2020, and in 2021, and perhaps could also extend in 2022. So when peoples experience losses, and when we are talking of livelihood losses, human settlement losses, and all kinds of losses, including life itself, you realize that people are in desperation and they can look for answers anywhere. So our brothers and sisters who are calling for any solution to this flooding are doing so because human survival has been tested and they are looking for answers. And this is why we call this awareness. So those people who have been calling for Jonglei Canal as a solution to flooding, perhaps some of them are doing so as a desperation measures for people to survive. But here we are today saying, well, if you are going to look for an intervention or a solution to a disease, it is important that we have a right diagnosis of that disease so that the prescription will not be a mismatch between the disease and the cure. And so this is awareness. And now some of them are beginning to listen. To your question about South Sudan, capacity of South Sudan will to respond to what is happening. Yes, I think they have the will. And they also have the trust of the people. This generation that is now the ruling party of the SPLM, as Professor Elkhazin mentioned, this is a generation that has fought for the independence of South Sudan. And today we are a sovereign nation because of their sacrifices. So the society have a trust in them. You don't liberate a country and then betray it. So I have no doubt in my mind that His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit and his cabinet, especially Council of Ministers, will not listen to the voices of the affected population, the voices of those of us who are alarming. The voices of seasoned experts like Professor Elkhazin, they are beginning to listen, and this is where the will lies. And so when we are looking now at where South Sudan will gain its courage, one source of its courage, it should have the courage to tell Egypt to hold on until all of the studies as far as dredging are done. And those studies need to be done by an independent body that is a combination of South Sudanese national, both in the country and outside the country, and also international experts such as Taj Elkhazin. So this is one way South Sudan can begin to now slow down Egypt. If all of these rumors are true, that the Egyptians have begun dredging. Also, you look at the rights and the benefit of the Nile. South Sudan, 90% of South Sudan fall within the Nile basin. And as, again, we discussed here, there are two additional important hydrological benefits to South Sudan. That the Bahr el Ghazal river system, all of it originated within South Sudan, in Western Equatoria, part of Western Bahr el Ghazal, the Lol, the Jur, and the Pango River, that all converge to form the Bahr el Ghazal river system. All of it originated within South Sudan. And as South Sudan, as a country on the river Nile basin, it's now become a source. This is an important finding. And this is a point of one of the key points for creating awareness. And this is where you get your courage. You have a say to this water because you have the right to it. And now the Sad extends, and the Bahr el Ghazal wetland extends, the Machar wetland extends. All of this has added a uniqueness to South Sudan hydrological cycle and to the water sources. So South Sudan again have the right. And if you have the right, you also have the benefit to the right. Now we are coming to the issues of governance in terms of the transboundary nature of the River Nile. There was one presentation that Professor Elkhazin did in my absence with Rumbeg Radio. He laid out clearly that it is imperative that South Sudan look into all of these treaties, those that were signed during the colonial time and those that were signed post the colonial era, whether they were signed by the countries in the upstream countries. These are important sources. These are international laws or treaties on international waters. And it is important that South Sudan anchor its understanding of the transboundary nature of water. So I tend to think that South Sudan is in the right position today to step back and now say, let us go back to the drawing board and begin a new beginning with water resources so that we have a holistic approach and we have a comprehensive approach, an inclusive approach. Not only the civil society that need to be part and parcel of this process, but also the affected population. I say in different forums that South Sudanese for the last century have had their heads shaped in their absence in London, in Cairo, and in, let's say, in all of these great former great power. This is the time South Sudan should have their head shaped now in Juba, meaning they have to own their affairs as a sovereign nation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deng, Majok, Chol, Professor Taj Elkhazin, for that well-articulate and well-informed response to the questions. As we are actually approaching to the end of our interview or the conversation, I first submit my apology to Professor for keeping you for 2 hours, considering your age. And it was not our intention. So our intention was to run the show for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Unfortunately, when the conversation is too sweet, and then the time starts running and flying. I will just throw in the last questions before I invite my co-host. If we look at the population of South Sudan, as you put it rightly, Prof, that is 11 to 12 million. That is estimation. And you have talked thing to do with sensitizations and civic educations, and Dr. Deng mentioned it. What are some of your recommendations that you can lay out for our audience to hear them in regard to this situation? Because sometimes government tend to listen to the voice of majority. And when minorities speak, the government tend to go silent and mute it. What are some of the recommendations you can lay out? And on the same note, you will give us your last closing remark or your last parting shot in this regard. So that's what the questions that I posed to two of you before we wind up our conversation of today. Thank you so much. Dr. Deng Majok, Chol, you can take lead. And then my uncle, the great father, Professor, will follow you. And thank you.
Yes, so in respect to some of the specific suggestions for civil society, as well as the affected population, I think on the side of civil society, this is an area where individuals who are educated or not even educated should have the opportunity to exercise their constitutional right. And that is to get together and form different civil society groups across the country and be able to engage at a national level, at a state level, at county level. So this does not require a permission from anybody. All it requires is that you are exercising your right as a citizen of a country to be able to engage in an issue that affects your lives, the lives of your family, and the lives of generations to come down the road. And as we know, the Sat, as well as the Nile waters of South Sudan and Bahr Ghazal, in Soba River system, all of them are source of livelihood in our countries, in our country, and on all our counties. As far as the affected population, some of these counties that has been disproportionately affected have their MPs, members of parliament. The members of parliament are at national level. They are also at the state level. So I think this is the role of the MPs to go back to their respective counties and areas and be able to have a dialogue. Call your population, your constituency, and have a dialogue with them. What do the things are measures that are necessary and that can enhance their resiliency? As I said earlier, this is not the time we want to appear with a project that is completely designed outside and imposed. It has to be a combination of scientific research coming from the educated and the research and the researchers, but also the voices and the lived experience of the affected population. This is where the MPs should engage their affected constituency to be able to have a healthy dialogue, to be able to create a healthy space where you come up with this container, where you bring the diversity of the people. The women are the one affected by drought more than men. The same thing, the flooding. So the women voice need to be here. The youth voice need to be here. What about the cattle keepers, the post release? These are the people whose cattle depend on the grassland that we are referring to, that is being recharged every season. They need to be part of this. Beyond the cattle keepers, what about the fishermen and fisherwomen? They need to be part of this. These are part of ecosystem. What about wildlife? I understand a lot of people, of course, are in South Sudan, different department of the army. But wildlife is one important part of the South Sudan army that youth and young people of even education need to join, because wildlife really has a potential promise to begin to get our country to a trajectory of economic growth. All of these are part and parcel of our society that are affected by the climate change and what we are seeing, and they need to be part of this dialogue that is either facilitated by the leaders or facilitated by individual and civil society. What about traditional leaders, the chief, for example, community leaders in their respective villages? It is important that we hear what they are saying in this process. And this is where the social impact assessment, along with economic impact assessment, environmental impact assessment come in. It got to be inclusive. It got to include the affected population. As I said before, South Sudanese heads have been shaved outside for long. This is time to begin to own their affairs, especially in leading discussion and in collaboration with international experts, with International Water Institute and International Environmental Institute. I like to close by this, that as much as we would like to have a quick solution for the affected population today, it's also equally imperative to be able to project into the future. When the generation that took arms left and liberated South Sudan, they did not know how long the revolution would take, but they gave their life, thinking that one day there will be liberation of South Sudan, whether during their lifetime or not, including His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayadi. When he took arms and was in a revolution until the end, he had no clue he would survive to the end. But lo and behold, he is alive now and is now in charge of the country. It is also important now to say that if we liberate South Sudan for the dignity of our people and for our children, it is also important today to realize that the natural resources we have, in this context, the water underground or on the ground surface or up in form of clouds above the sun, that all of these resources are for the benefit of not just this generation, but of the generation to come. And that it needs wisdom to be exercised. It needs judgment to be exercised. I have seen very educated people taking political position or emotional position about this issue. This is not an issue that is supposed to be tackled politically or emotionally. This is an issue that requires us as a nation to have a soul set, as a nation to give expertise the opportunity to explain to people how do we move from here. So I have no doubt that the leadership of His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayadi will listen to us and will listen to the population, and that we will step back as a country and we will not put the cart before the horse. We will get our order right in this instance. And we cannot underestimate the role of climate change. It is important that we do more research on the climate change and how the Sad Basin, the Bahar Kazal Basin, and the river, the Soba River Basin will respond hydrologically to the climate change. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor. Prof, you can take over.
Right. Well, thank you, Majok, for being concerned about me being here for 2 hours. Let me challenge you. If we go into an Ugara, I can dance longer and stronger than you.
That is great.
Noted.
And
noted.
you know the beautiful women in the Ugara, they go for the strong man. Right. A number of practical, to the point suggestions, what I call down to earth suggestions. I would suggest that a concerned group of the citizens is to establish a professional website in which we upload all the 11 Nile Basin agreements, all the 27 major basins agreements in Africa, and all the rivers, major rivers, St. Lawrence, the Rhone, the Rhine, all those have got cooperative agreements signed, and they are regulating the water like a clock. So we need to build knowledge to start with. Solid knowledge that is not based on emotional standings. Empirical facts. Such a website, the domain will cost between $200 to $300 US dollars to have a proper domain and to have good capacity. If for any reason the group of people who might do that don't have the money, I will pay the $300. It's not a problem. I will pay the first year. There is a world-renowned body called the International Joint Commission. They are regulating the waters of the Great Lakes, something very similar. This is a body that was formed by the British when the British were still colonizing Canada. So in 1909, they signed an agreement with the Americans. If that agreement was not signed, God knows what the Americans would have done to the Canadians. But the agreement was solid, and the St. Lawrence and the 5 Great Lakes in Canada, which is the center of Canada, and they're shared with the US, it is managed by the International Joint Commission. They have got a wealth of information. They have got a wealth of solutions on drought, on running water, on floods, unbelievable. And they're very cooperative. I am in their in their mailing list, and they invite me to all their conferences. And if there is interest, I can send. If you Google the International Joint Commission, IJC, it will come out. So we need a group to contact them for awareness, to see if they are willing to lend a hand to South Sudan on how to deal with the issues of the set. As you know, as well as I do, our women in South Sudan, trust me, they have paid the bigger price during the war, because the man takes his gun and he goes, and the woman is left behind. And in one of the villages, not very far from Bor, I was advising Coleman Young at that time. An American NGO, young men, very enthusiastic, are coming here, we will change the world. And they asked for women to be assembled. They asked me to assemble a group of women, which I did. And they had money and they had a program. And then they made the mistake of saying, well, we are here to empower you. And I was translating. So one of the women said, wait. They are coming to empower me? I have got 8 children. My husband left. I am protecting them. I am feeding them. I'm taking them to school. I am cultivating. And she wants to empower me? When I translated, the Americans packed up, got into their car, and they went away. So we need to bring women on board. Always have what we call a women lens, children lens and women lens. But let us have a targeted program. I can help if you want. I can help if any project comes out of how can we better engage South Sudanese women on issues of the Nile waters. I am willing to help. The other recommendation is, let us create teaching modules. Madame Salwa Jibril, the wife of Bona Malwal, she's a lawyer by profession. She had a small institute and she created modules for awareness among the government in Juba. She's a good woman. But creating a module, then you can distribute it. We give one to Jonglei University, we give one to Bahr al-Ghazali University, one to Juba, And the module is to be taught by somebody so that the newer generations have got awareness through these modules. As Majok rightly said, I am too old to do that kind of work, but I can help. So if there is a group of young intellectuals like Deng and others who are willing to start writing an awareness module on Nile waters, stroke flood mitigation. And the module could be an hour module. Once you if a module is created, and it can be put on YouTube, I am willing to revise it and see if I can have input. Also, I suggest that a team of young professionals is to approach the United Nations. What role did the United Nations play in all this fiasco? Even if I know the answer, I wouldn't say it because I am now commissioned to write a report for them, so I need to keep my neutrality. But you need to know what is the positive role that an organization like the United Nations can actually play. What is an organization like the AU can actually play? The AU, whenever the things get hot, they duck, they go under the bed. But you can wake them up. So I suggest that a group of young intellectuals can actually write to the African Union and say, oh, we need help. And my last point is an advocacy that I have been doing, and I would suggest that you and your listeners will probably consider it. And that is signing on and ratifying the Nile Basin Initiative's Cooperative Framework Agreement. Right now, we have got 5 signatories. We have got 4 ratifications. If we get 1 more signatory, 2 more ratifications, 6 out of 11, the 11 countries of the Nile, the agreement goes into force. The position of Egypt will be greatly weakened. They have been bending backwards to crush the Nile Basin Initiative and to crush the cooperative agreement. So let us take that as a specific, even isolated target. Let us not lobby, pester our government, because the documents are in Juba, they have passed through the executive, they are now with the parliament. So we all want to lobby that the 2 houses pass the agreement, South Sudan signs, pressure President Kiir, let him ratify it. He's the one who will ascend it. It's called ascend, to ascend it. That has another dimension other than water. That proves that the South Sudanese people are with their fellow Africans. It is really shameful. It is really shameful that a country like South Sudan, which is an African country, is not to sign with the other 5 countries that have already signed on. So there are quite a bit of do's, and in this short menu, I can improve on it later on, but in this short menu, there is stuff that civil society can do, and there is stuff where civil society can push the buttons for the government to do. And thank you very much for inviting me. I have no problem with the time. I have been with South Sudan and the South Sudanese people since 1972 in May. I have slept under trees. I have slept in tents. I have slept in tukuls. Not once was I attacked. Not once was told that I'm in Dukuru. Not once was I in danger. There is so much goodness in the people of South Sudan, unbelievable. They deserve far more than what they are getting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Comrade Majok, there are few things that I just want to add. Can I take a minute or two?
It's okay,
Yes.
granted.
All right. So yes, and Professor Elkhazin, these were designed so that you concluded. So if you think of a conclusion for 50 seconds after me. So yes, I just wanted, there is a point about the artificial lake on a long-term basis that I suggested on the triangular area of Upper Nile, Jonglei, and Pijbor administrative area. I had wanted to add that once that is successful and it is operational and it is on a long-term basis, that it has the potential to be replicated on the Bahr Khazal River system, and especially where the Lol River, the Pango, and the Ju River converge. Again, depending on the studies that need to be done, of course, prior to such project, so that you have the fuller dam renovated on the Bahar al Jabal going to the south. And that can, of course, be a source of hydropower and also modulate the flooding. And then you have this artificial lake on the Bahar Kazar River system that can also help, depending on how human settlement are and urbanization that is coming up, that can also control some flooding and provide water on that part of the Nile River system in South Sudan. And then you have this artificial lake adjacent to the Sobat, the Bahara, Pijbor, Soba River system. I wanted to make sure that that vision is captured. That's what I wanted to articulate. Then the second point related to what Professor Kazin just mentioned. I, along with young other people, both ladies and gentlemen of South Sudan, who have interest or expertise in environment, hydrology, as well as climate science, are picking up some of the suggestions that Professor Al-Kazin has just pointed out. For example, one of the projects that we are picking up is this idea of having a national archive in form of the SAT library, so that we can be able to get all, there are ways to talk to the universities around the world, that we can retrieve all archive that can be stored right in South Sudan, and that can be repository for research. So we are already beginning to do that. We have reached out to some people in South Sudan and outside South Sudan, and we are making sure that women, our young ladies, are also involved in this process. Then the last point is about South Sudan interest in listening to what we are putting forward, their willingness to listen to the expert. When I was in South Sudan in November, December of last year, I had the fortunate opportunity to talk to a good number of officials, including senior officials in the cabinet of His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit, as well as in the parliament. And his Honorable Michael McQueen Lewis had actually gave me a wonderful platform where I spoke with members of parliament from Jonglei. I also had opportunity to talk with members of parliament of Upper Nile through Honorable Joshua Dowdew connection. I also had an opportunity to talk with some of the MPs from Werap and from Lagos State. And so there is willingness to look for answers and to listen to the expert. And I believe that this presentation, Lagos State Media done today, will also be part of that awareness. I appreciate your inviting me to join Professor Elkhazin, to be with him, and it has been an honor to be with you alongside him. Thank you very much.
You are most welcome. I will just take my 40 or 50 seconds. I would like us to stage and segment our approach to getting command and control of the waters of South Sudan. And the first step is awareness. There is lack of credible, scientific, evidence-based, empirical awareness on which governments can build solid decisions in the interest of the people. So that's the phase. We are not really there. We are just opening the door. We are just opening the door. So any group actually needs to consider that. We don't want to jump over this step and go to an area that we are not prepared for. So awareness is extremely important. The second area is knowledge. The idea of the library, I helped, without mentioning names, one of the ex-chief justices, the Department of Justice of Canada gave them a library for, I think it was $50,000. They built a complete library at the time when Michael Wakway was the Minister for Legal Affairs. And when I started talking about the Nile waters and the agreement, Michael came to one of my presentations, which was at the UN. And then he said, Tai, you are talking about all these agreements. We don't know what you're talking about. I went to his office and I did a presentation for him. And I gave him a USB with all the Nile agreements. And I went to his undersecretary and I did the same. And then I did 4 or 5 other presentations, just awareness presentations. And they were a wake-up call for the UN and the NGOs in Cuba. Everybody was talking about food and distributing this and digging wells. Well, what about this heap of water? Where do we stand? So awareness is extremely important. Let us start at that step. I want to give a targeted suggestion to Lake State. If you can organize a joint session between the government of South Sudan or the representatives and civil society, and I am willing to come on board and see if I can moderate or facilitate or just act as a reference. But let us start a meaningful, controlled, civilized dialogue between civil society and the government of South Sudan. They are the government of the day. There is nothing we can do about it. And let us be careful about the lens of youth. Let us be careful about the lens of women so that we have a good cross-section. It has been a pleasure being with you. And my competition with Majok in the Nugara stands anytime he is willing. And I am here for you anytime you want to have a mini or a larger one. If you come up with more themes and you want me, if you want some advice on the, I have got all the records of, right. I have got all the records of the Horn of Africa over here. And I have got maps that date back to 1923. The entire maps of Sudan, 65, 67 of them are at the back there. Those are non-existent now. I tried to give those maps when South Sudan separated. I tried to buy a set from the survey department in Khartoum to give it to South Sudan. They refused. So what I have here, you don't have in South Sudan, you don't have in Juba. And then the universities. Let us see if we can have some connection with the, because in another 20, 25, 30 years, Majok will be as old as I am. So what about the future? So let us see what can we do in the institutional, educational institutions. Thank you very much. It has been a great pleasure. You are welcome anytime, and God bless you and God bless South Sudan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I give you applause. Yeah, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and thanks to both of you for giving us your time to come and feed our citizens of South Sudan who are yelling to hear about to talk, to listen to you about the Jonglei Canal and our usage of water, You really answered and exhausted the question that we have put across, and the thing that we put forward for you. It's a great pleasure to have you, all of you, on board. So thank you, Abraham Madid, for coming up to come and give appreciation to Dr. Deng Majok Chol and Professor Elkhazin. And we are looking forward bringing you here, and we will work on the request to have some from the government side as well to be part of this journey to campaign about this. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. God bless you. Take care.
Thank
Are
you.
you recording? Are you recording this session?
Yes, it's recorded. Yes. We will send everything to you. Let Abraham come in.
Yeah, it's actually recorded on YouTube too.
I see.
Yeah,
okay,
so
perfect. That's great.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
it's good. So I just want to say thank you so much, Professor Taj and Dr. Deng Majok, for coming in. This is the wonderful discussion. Our people has learned a lot, including me. It's been a wonderful, and we will wait you two to come back again. This is a very important topic, and you highlight us, Professor Taj. We are so grateful to have you in our media platform. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Thank
good
you so
morning.
much,
Good afternoon,
Prof.
wherever, for those who are
Professor,
tuning.
I have a message for you.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. By the time you'll be going to South Sudan, if government will manage to facilitate your visit to South Sudan, to have conversation with them in regard to Jonglei Canal, I will be happy if you go with Dr. Deng Majok, and he will identify some of water engineers South Sudanese who are like-minded like him to join you so that you can go and try to talk to our people, especially the government, to understand it. Number two, you said clearly during your opening remark that you have actually helped the whole Upper Nile region, especially Jonglei, with 175 appeal. I'm requesting if you can still, on that note, we will be grateful also to at least to extend your hand or your kindness to Lagos State, because Lagos State is in really need of appeal in that territory. To Deng Majok, I'm grateful, my brother, to meet you in this occasion. And on behalf of Lagos State Media, we are grateful, and it was our honor to have you. May God bless you all, and may God bless South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
It's your boy Young Love, I give him that time. Control Lagos State, Panchi America, Panji Dual, Control Lagos State, Panchi America, Panji Dual, walk on the lake, Kankara, water, no watching, Oga, level leg, gear, pow, very leg, Panda with Yay, Panchi America, Panya Dual, Chingatonga, Pandon, could you ever buy a check out, Papu Panda, Jiro, what they be, Dual, venting. Panchi America, Panji Dual, Pancha Lagos State, Panchi America, Panji Dual, walk on the lake, Kankara, water, no watching, Oga, level leg, gear, pow, very leg, Panda with Yay, Panchi America, Panya Dual, Chingatonga, Pandon, could you ever buy a check out, Paku Panda, Jiro, what they be, Dual, venting.